Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Haley Mandrup, and I'm one of the trainers with Redtail Technology. Today we're continuing in our workflow series entitled Working Willfully with Workflows. And today is the session all about building those workflows within the CRM. Today's session is going to be a little shorter just because most of the work that goes into workflows is going to be completed in the whiteboarding stage, which was last week's session. So that's where you sit down with everyone in your office or everyone involved in whatever process you're working on and list out all of the tasks or individual to-do items that need to be completed in a process, such as a client review or client onboarding. Maybe it's a prospecting campaign. Whatever process you're looking to put into Redtail, you can whiteboard it out, listing all the tasks that need to be completed within that process, and then involve everyone who completes any of those tasks. That's going to help increase your buy-in from everyone involved in that process. So we're just going to go over a little bit of review before we jump right into building a workflow. I just wanted to bring up this slide from the previous session that goes over the parts of a workflow. There are 4 main components of a workflow, and they're each very different. And of the 4, 3 are really vital to your workflow process. And that's the first 3, your step, your task, and your outcome. The 4th, the target date, I always say that that's an optional item. Now, it is a great optional item to have, but ultimately, depending on how you work, if you work well without due dates and just want to work off a to-do list that doesn't have due dates, the target date is a great optional item, so you don't have to have a target date. However, with certain processes like prospecting and onboarding and client reviews, a lot of items are time specific, so that target date is included in here in our 4 parts of a workflow because it can be very vital depending on the process. So let's break it down and just look at them specifically. A step is a stage of the process. It's where you're at. So if you're a boss and you're listening, or if you're someone that's maybe not the boss in your office, but you have to report to someone, I always say a step is a description of where you're at. If someone asked you, oh, where are we at with the client review with Indiana Jones? Your reply would be whatever the step is called. Oh, we're in the preparation. We're in the day of. Today's the day that we're having the client review. Oh, we're in the follow-up stage. We're just working on sending out the handwritten thank you note that our office sends out. So it's just a description of where you're at. Now with an account transfer, that might be where you're waiting to get paperwork back from the client or waiting to get approval back from an account aggregator or custodian. Whatever the step is, it's only a description of where you're at. The task is more detailed than that. The tasks are your actual to-do items. These would be the action items that someone in your office is completing. Those are individual to-do items for each step, and they're assigned out to different users. Maybe they're assigned to different teams. They're going to be assigned to either a team of people that work on the same level or can complete the same tasks, or a specific person. Then our outcomes. Outcomes are our directional items. I love using the analogy of a GPS system. Most of us have used a GPS system at some point or another. And when Google's giving you those directional items or those directions, you get a list of street names, and then you get directions on whether or not to turn right or left. Well, the outcomes are those items that say right or left. It wouldn't be very helpful if someone gave you directions to a location but neglected to tell you to turn right or left on each street name. You'd get really lost on the way to your destination. So those outcomes, while they seem optional, they're actually really vital to determining what the next step is in the process. For example, in a client review, if a client needs to reschedule, you can't just move forward and plan for the day as you were before. You're going to have to change the date on the activity, change the date on the workflow, and you might even have to rerun reports depending on how far in the future they're rescheduling for. So those outcomes are very important. They're the end results of steps that can take the workflow to different places. That may include in a prospecting process whether or not the client is going to move forward or whether or not the prospect is going to move forward and become a client. your steps definitely vary on if they're going to go ahead and become a client versus if they're not. And then finally, those target dates. Target dates are not due dates. With activities, we have a date where we want to get that item done by. A target date is a date that the workflow revolves around. So if it is a client review or prospect meeting process, the date that the workflow revolves around is most commonly the date of the activity. Some processes, like a withdrawal, will have a due date. You usually want to get the money to the client within 10 days of them requesting a check, or 5 days, or whatever your office standard is. A target date might be a due date, but it's not necessarily. It is a date that the whole workflow process revolves around. Now that we've looked at the components of a workflow, this is the example workflow that Nora, another trainer at Redtail, covered in the previous session. So we're looking at specifically onboarding a prospect, and this is the result of our whiteboarding stage where everyone in our office or everyone involved in the onboarding process would have sat down, put down all the steps that our office completes, and then she went ahead and numbered all of these items for what step they're a part of. So we have to edit the PowerPoint presentation that's assigned to Teddy, and it's going to be part of step 1. And then she's listed out the steps for us over here, where the steps or our stages are preparation, meeting day, and follow-up. What we're going to do is translate this whiteboarded information into a workflow within Redtail. So the first thing I like to do is create the workflow template. And to do that, I'm going to pull up the CRM here. And workflow templates can be created by any user in the database by going to your name in the top right-hand corner, manage your account, and then in the templates section under manage templates, we're going to go to workflow templates. Once here, if you have workflow templates, they're going to show. If you don't, then you'll still have the option to create new. So depending on where your office is at in the process, you might have some templates in here, you might not. You can always add a new one by clicking new in the top right-hand corner. Now, when we first click new, it's going to give us the option to add a name. So we're going to name it onboarding prospects. Now, since I do have a lot of workflows in my database, I'm going to go ahead and add an asterisk to the beginning of this title because the workflows sort alphabetically. What this will do is have this workflow sort to the top so that we can see it during the session while we're working together. But that is a good trick to know. If you want your workflows to sort in a certain order, you can number the titles, and it's just going to create an easier way of viewing your workflows. So if you want to number them in order of the client lifecycle, that's a great way to go about it. Add a number 1 for your first prospecting meeting, 2 for your second prospecting meeting, 3 for your onboarding meeting, 4 for your client reviews, or something like that. Now the status, I definitely want to leave the status as under construction because I don't want anyone in my database opening up this workflow process on a client record until it's fully baked and all done. What happens when you open a workflow process on a client record is it essentially copies and pastes that template onto the client record. So we wouldn't want a half-completed process to be pasted to a client record because the person completing that process would run into issues without the process being fully completed. Our next option here is for a workflow owner. This can be a manager in the office, maybe the advisor wants to get email updates on where the workflow process is at, or maybe you have multiple advisors in the office and you want to list the advisor on that client's account as the owner for your records and your internal meetings and all that. So the owner can be assigned to a user, a team, or a role within Redtail. Now, if you've used Redtail and other sections, you're probably familiar with users. You are a user if you've logged into Redtail. Teams are pretty common. You can use teams to notify multiple users of activities, notes, and other items in the system. And you can add users and teams under the users and teams page under manage your account if you're an admin user. But roles is a feature central to workflows. And you may not have come across this before, but this is great for larger offices. If you have three or more advisors in your office, multiple CSAs, and specific teams divvied up by advisor and CSA, you would have to have multiple templates, one for Frank the advisor, one for Tim the advisor, and one for Michael the advisor, so that all of the steps would assign to their appropriate advisors and their appropriate CSAs. Roles is a great way to designate an advisor on a contact record as the primary advisor, and then you can also identify an associate advisor by labeling different users in the system. So if Sally was the advisor, you would designate her as the role advisor on a contact record, and then when this workflow attaches to her record, it assigns to the user Sally. Definitely reach out to our support team if you want more information on roles and you think they might work for your team, but it is going to be a less common option unless your office has multiple advisors that are working through the same process and they have specific clients they work with. So we'll go ahead and assign this to the user, and we'll assign it to Tucker. Tucker's the main advisor in our office. And category. Now the category pulls from the same category list as your activities and notes and documents. So the categories that we're faced with are going to be the same ones that we use for all of those other items. Since this is an onboarding process, I'm going to go ahead and choose onboarding meeting as the category. Now I probably can be less specific with the category itself and change that to just onboarding, since this process may or may not have to do with a meeting. We don't know yet because we haven't started entering it. This next option has to do with setting the target date. So this is where you can say for a withdrawal request that you want it completed a certain number of days, weeks, or months after it's created. So if you want to open a workflow every time a withdrawal is requested, this can automatically set your due date. Your target date and your due date are the same thing in this sense as 10 days in the future. With this onboarding workflow, we're not going to choose that, but it is relevant for other workflow processes. And then finally, the description. This description is a great place to put just that, a description of what the onboarding process is for prospects in your office. Maybe you want certain information filled out and available within the workflow. The description shows at the top of the open workflow. So that's a great place to put any notes about that person that you want anyone working on the workflow to see. So you can leave it blank in the template and just utilize it when attaching the template to a contact record as well. Once we get through all that information, we can create the workflow template, and it's just going to make it available within the database on our templates page. It's sorted to the top again because of that asterisk, so that's a nice little trick there. You can choose the way that they sort based on numbers and symbols and all that. But you will notice that the status is under construction and it does have 0 steps. So now we have to actually go in and add the steps to the workflow and build out the steps, the tasks, the outcomes, and the target date. So to open it up, I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And now we're within the process template itself. Now we can add the steps from our template. So based on our whiteboarding that was completed in the last session, we're going to add 3 steps. Step 1 is preparation, step 2 is meeting day, and step 3 is follow-up. Going back to the CRM, we're going to click New Step 3 times. and it's going to generate those steps for us. Now that I have a step within the workflow, I have an action icon that gives me the ability to edit that step. Steps have a name, so we're going to name this preparation, and our whiteboarding determined how many days it should be due. So this should be 1 day before the target date. The meeting day should be the day of the target date, and the follow-up is 1 day after. So we're just doing 1 day before, 1 day after, and the day of. So we've got our first step for preparation, and we're going to set it to be 1 day before the target date. We want to prep for the meeting 1 day before the meeting. Now, if you were prepping a week in advance and maybe you wanted to send a physical mailing to remind them of the meeting, you can insert a mail merge document in here if you have a form letter for a new client onboarding meeting reminder. Since it's 1 day before, obviously we can't send anything out. It won't get to that person in time, so we're not going to do a mail merge on this step. And then anytime a step needs further description, you can add a description here. So we're going to update that step. And now we have preparation due 1 day before target date. A lot of building the workflows has to do with repetition. So I'll just go very quickly through to add the second step. This will be day of meeting. And in order to set the target date as this day, we want this to be the day of the meeting. We're going to say 0 days before target date. So that's a little trick to set the workflow step on the same day as the target date. This is going to be 0 days before, and it's going to be the exact same day as the target date. That target date, again, is the date that the whole workflow revolves around. So this workflow is moot if we don't actually meet with the person. It all revolves around this meeting. We're going to update that step. And then finally, edit our third step for follow-up. And this will be 1 day after the target date. Now here, if we could send a mail merge for a thank you letter out, maybe everyone in our office hand signs a thank you card, or maybe we have a form letter with a picture of everyone in our office or a postcard that we send out to thank them. That's a great little value add for coming in, even if they didn't end up going through with onboarding. Once our steps are added, we can add tasks inside each individual step. So in the preparation phase, we're again going to reference our whiteboarding from last session. And we've got tasks here that are numbered for the steps that they're a part of. So this one is going to be edit PowerPoint presentation, and that's going to be assigned to Teddy. I'll head back over to the CRM. Add a new task. Now that I have a step, I have a button to add a task. And then we're going to edit that task. I'm just going to paste that content in here and then assign to user Teddy Dobbs. Now, the difference between a task and a step, you can already tell the step determines the dates. The tasks don't have individual dates. And these are assigned to specific people because these are the action icons. If there's multiple people that fulfill the same role, feel free to assign it to a team, and either person can complete that task. It'll show up on all of the pages where you can view tasks. Something to keep in mind, though, is if you assign it to a team, there is something that happens called diffusion of responsibility, and everyone might think someone else on the team will do it. So the way that Redtail recommends to handle those situations is assign it to a team, but only put one person on that team. There's a reason for that. When you assign it to a user and that user goes on vacation, or is out of the office for any reason, assigning all of their workflow tasks to another person can be cumbersome. That's why teams exist within the system to create easier reassignments when situations like this arise. So if you have one CSA, create a team for CSA, assign all of the tasks that are going to be that customer service associate's roles to that team. And then if that person goes on vacation, you can easily add someone to the team to take over for that week and then remove them when that week is over. I'm going to stick with user here because that's what my whiteboarding process told me to do, but ideally I would have a team with Teddy on it by himself. Now, also within a task, the descriptions within a task are very useful. This is where you can put step-by-step instructions, or maybe you want to have a phone script. If you're going to have them call and confirm the meeting, you can have a phone script in here, depending on how specific and particular you want to be with your client interactions. Working with clients, I've seen anything from step-by-step instructions on how exactly to prepare a conference room to detailed phone scripts that they want verbatim read when checking in with the client on the phone. We'll go ahead and update that task. And then add another task within the preparation stage per our whiteboarding once more. This one was to prepare new client paperwork, and it's assigned to Tabitha. And then we're also going to confirm meeting with prospect. So we'll add both of those on step 1. To edit the task, I'm going to click on the action icon, edit task, paste in that information, and then assign to user Tabitha, and update that task. Now in this case, I was very generic. I said prepare new client paperwork. Here's where I could say print profile form. That's the profile form within Redtail that is going to have any information we have on them, and then it will have blank fields for information we might want. So you can print that out, take a highlighter to it, and highlight the information that you would like them to fill out. And maybe we have a new client questionnaire that we want them to fill out that's going to ask them for their favorite coffee and all of that information, so we can have specific detailed information about maybe where they want a vacation or what their pets' names are, or if they have any children and want to plan on putting together college savings accounts for those kids. We might have a questionnaire that we want them to fill out as well. We'll go ahead and update that task. And our final task, if we reference our PowerPoint again, is going to be confirm the meeting with the prospect. That's super important. We've planned a meeting and put it on the calendar, but we definitely want to reach out and confirm it. For some offices, that looks like calling, that looks like maybe an email, or maybe you do send a letter to confirm the date and time through the mail system. We'll assign that to Teddy. Now, in our workflow, I do point out again that this is generic. It does say confirm. If you want a call in order to ensure a consistent client experience, use the word call so that the person assigned this request knows how to contact them. Now, if you just want them to contact them, it doesn't matter to you if they email them or call, that's fine too. But if you do prefer a call, definitely use specific language. Now that we have all of our tasks for step 1, we are going to add tasks for step 2. And that's going to be prepare conference room and confirm new client paperwork. So we'll just add those quickly here. New task again. Confirm client paperwork. Maybe you want to make sure it's laid out in a nice folder on the conference room table. And then we want to prepare the conference room. Now, here at Redtail, with dogs in the office, we definitely have to prepare our conference rooms before clients come in or auditors come in, or anytime we have a visitor, we have to go make sure all the dog toys are picked up. So that might not be the case for you, but if you do have a computer in there, you want to make sure that it's set up for any presentations that you're going to be giving, or if you have one of those nicer tabletops, wiping the fingerprints off would be a good move before a client comes in. Again, in working with clients, I've seen anything from the day of, including preparing the conference room, to marking out a parking spot for them in the parking lot, or maybe you have a digital sign that you put their name on and welcome them that way. Or maybe you prepare their favorite coffee and have it set out in the room, or buy their favorite drink, or have their favorite cookie, or whatever it is. You can add that special sauce in this workflow by saying, reference the contact's user-defined fields to determine their favorite drink and have that available at the meeting. Really, those special extra mile ways you can delight your clients. Now that we're at our follow-up stage, we're going to once again reference our PowerPoint and copy over the tasks to submit new client paperwork, update client details, that would be the client details within Redtail, and set review date. So we're going to add a bunch of new tasks here in the follow-up. There's lots of stuff to do after someone is going to come on as a client. Submit the new client paperwork. Update contact details. Now this is interesting because this means in Redtail, so I'll go ahead and specify in Redtail. And you may have noticed in adding contact records, we don't have required fields. That's not a feature Redtail currently has. It might be something we want to add in the future, but this is a workaround or a way to require fields for your office. So you may want to take down their nickname if they have one, take down their tax ID number, driver's license information, or maybe scan that information, and birthday, spouse, and children details, and any other information that your office wants to have. So I would list out those fields in this description since it's readily available to Teddy when he's completing the task. And that's a great way to require, and I say that with quotations, since Redtail doesn't have a way to actually require fields, this will make sure that the person assigned the task will get that information that you want on record for them. I'm going to jump back over to the PowerPoint here. We've done submit new client paperwork and update client details. Now we're going to set the review date. And then it looks like in our office, we follow up with a new client. We follow up with the new client with a handwritten card and a gift box. So we're going to have two more tasks here. One, to set the review date. Since we've had an initial meeting with them, we can go ahead and start a review frequency through the client review field on their contact record. And that's where your office may have rules depending on how you tier out your clients. If they're gold, silver, bronze, or A, AA, AAA, as Redtail recommends, you can specify in that description box. If they're a AA client, they get 2 reviews a year. If they're a AAA client, they get quarterly reviews. Or whatever the frequency is, base that on their tier as a client, and then you can have that outline within the description. So whoever's setting up the initial review will know what frequency to select for that client. As you can tell, a lot of the time we've spent together here has been in building the steps and the outcomes, or the steps and the tasks out in the workflow. Our next step is to add those outcomes. The reason we have to add all the steps first and all the tasks first is because the outcomes direct to other steps. So if you haven't added all of your steps yet, you're going to have a hard time adding outcomes to steps that don't yet exist. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint here. This is again still from our whiteboarding, which was last session. And we've got some outcomes here. We're only going to go through the outcomes on the first step just for time. And now you know a lot of workflow building is repetition, and I don't want to bore you to tears by going through all of the steps. But the first one is a great example of why you need outcomes in a workflow process. So we're editing the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, that doesn't really matter if it gets done, a day before, but we definitely want to finish it the day of. Preparing the new client paperwork, same thing. We're going to confirm it the next day. The really important task here is the fact that we're reaching out to call and confirm the meeting with the prospect. Because when we call and confirm that meeting, a couple different things may happen. First, everything can go well. It might be a perfect world scenario where they just confirm, they say, yep, I'm going to see you when I see you at that meeting that we've scheduled, and I can absolutely make the date and time that I originally scheduled with you. If that's the case, we're going to add an outcome by clicking to the left of the step and choosing Add Outcome and say Meeting Confirmed. Once the meeting's confirmed, we can successfully move on to the day of the meeting. Make sense? Now let's talk about the worst case scenario. They were going to come on board, we were going to have our onboarding meeting, but something happened and now they're not going to come on board. Maybe they've decided to go with another advisor or whatever it is. We now have to cancel this process. Rather than navigating to the delete button, which erases all the work you've put in with this client already, you can add an outcome for canceled. We'll say meeting canceled. If the meeting is canceled, this is a way to complete the workflow. So just because you have completed workflows on a client record, it doesn't mean they went through every step in the workflow. It means it closed out at any step in the process, really. Create that outcome. And now we've got 2 of our 3 recommended scenarios. One's the best case, one's the worst case, and then the third is any other common scenario. Well, there's only one other thing we can do with the meeting, and that's reschedule. So we'll add an outcome for meeting rescheduled. And in this case, we're not deleting the workflow, we're not completing it out, but we also can't move forward to the day of the meeting because our dates have to change. So we're actually going to go in a circle. We may have to reprint out reports. We're definitely going to have to call and reconfirm if it's very far in the future. So we're going to have to repeat these steps. Once you have all your outcomes for the entire process, that's when you can go back to your workflow templates page and make that template active so that it can be utilized in the CRM. All right, so we've looked at building the workflow and building it out. Now I haven't added all my outcomes, but I'll still go ahead and show you how to mark it active since that was a little bit ago that we talked about that. So to get back to your workflows page, you're going to go to your name in the top right-hand corner, manage your account, and then workflow templates. I'm going to go right up here to the top where my onboarding prospects process is and use that action icon to the left to edit that workflow and change the status to active. Once it's active, it's available to be selected on contact records and get added to the database. So thank you everyone for joining this session on how to build a workflow within Redtail. It is a little bit shorter than the whiteboarding process and a lot of it's repetitive, so I appreciate you bearing with me. Again, my name's Haley, and if you have any additional questions about building workflows or want a trainer to look at your workflows specifically, go ahead and give us a call, 800-206-5030, or email us at support@redtailtechnology.com. Thank you and have a great day.